Hi, I'm Ernie, and I'm the voice of this review of computer security issues. By the way, this is our 33rd video in this FAQ series. Some of those 33 videos are devoted to specialized topics, and that would only interest a few people. However, this video covers things that are important to everyone who uses a computer, so I'm hoping it will appeal to a broader audience. Of course, it's even more important to law offices because they store not only their own personal information, but also the confidential information of others. Okay, let's see what there is to see. First thing I want to talk about is passwords and password managers. I'm dividing this review of security issues into 3 sections. The first deals with keeping confidential information confidential, and passwords are the first line of defense. There are 2 rules about passwords. The first is don't reuse passwords. Here's a story that illustrates the point. Well, it doesn't really illustrate the point, but it's a story anyway. I made a password for the ATM machine in the office building that I worked in. I think this was in the 1970s, if that's when they first started with the ATM machines. And I used that password faithfully for years. When the internet came along a couple decades later, and I needed a password for everyone or everything that I had dealings with, what more natural thing was there than to keep using the same old password? It had served me well for 20 years. That's an example, but it's a bad example. It's an example of what usually was happening, and it's an example of why experts say that it's not a good idea to do that. And the obvious reason is if a criminal gets one password, they have all of your passwords. The second golden rule is to make your passwords long and complicated. That is great advice, but it is also the equivalent of making passwords that you can't possibly remember without some sort of aid. Currently, I have 301 usernames and passwords in a password-protected, encrypted Excel spreadsheet. How else could I keep track of them? Now they accumulate like ants at a picnic. The fact is that if you follow the expert's advice, you've got to have something to record your passwords, and that's what password managers are for, and I'll bet there are dozens of them out there for you to choose from. They let you create long, complicated passwords. Some will even generate the password for you, and of course that allows you to have a different password for every different occasion that you need one. 3 consumer recommended password managers are 1Password, Keeper, and Bitwarden. Personally, I don't know a thing about them because Google Chrome and Microsoft Edge both have password managers built in. The drawback is that you need to be using the browser for the manager to work. Now, I was thinking about it, and offhand, I can't think of times when I'm needing a password and I'm not online in my browser anyway, but I'm sure that there are occasions, I just can't think of any right now. When that happens, and it does happen occasionally, I resort to the spreadsheet then. Otherwise, Google Chrome and Microsoft Edge seem to work just fine for me. Now, another disadvantage of password managers is that excepting Chrome and Edge, these password managers aren't free. 1Password, for example, offers 4 monthly licenses: a business license for $8 a month, a team license for $4 a month, a personal license for $3 a month, and a family license for $5 a month. And I don't even know if that's per machine or not. If it was Antivirus Software, you'd be buying it for each machine, although I think sometimes it'll cover 2 to 4 machines or something like that. But anyway, there's going to be a cost for the password manager if you don't use one of the free ones. Now, here's something I noticed, is that LastPass was not included in this recommended list that I've obtained, even though it had been in the past. And I think that it was downgraded because that LastPass had a security breach incident. And while they claim that none of our actual passwords were compromised, still it was a security breach, and it has to hurt the image of a company selling security software. So that's the story there. Anyway, the LastPass misfortune segues nicely into my opinion about password managers. And that is that I love that a password manager automatically fills in my passwords as I'm browsing. That is great. I feel perfectly safe and happy using Chrome and Edge. But I still keep a backup in an Excel spreadsheet, which I understand uses the same encryption system found in most commercial managers. So, I don't know. My philosophy is that the last thing I want to do is surrender the keys to the vault, so to speak, to LastPass or any other third-party company. If you're storing the confidential information of others, you're responsible for the passwords, and I could easily see someone arguing that it would be negligent not to have some kind of fallback or backup position when it comes to trusting another company to handle all your passwords. Enough said about that subject. Let's go on to something else. Along the same lines, it's called multi-factor authentication. When it comes to accessing your account information, you've probably run into multi-factor identification. What it is where in addition to your username and password, you're required to go through a second identity check. Usually this is done by text or email. It's a tough one to demonstrate here because I'm not recording this video on my iMac and I can't think of any other accounts that have this feature enabled. If it's available, I usually don't choose it. And, you know, I should have mentioned while we were talking about passwords, I happen to have a password manager up here. This is the Google one. But now I'm going to move on to Google's account page, and you'll see that here's this, they call it two-step verification, and you see, like I was saying, I have it off. I usually don't choose it. Anyway, this is the way it works. You try to log in, you enter your name, your username and password, and the site sends a code to your smartphone, or I should say a text with a code in it to your smartphone. Then you enter that code in at the login page. The obvious advantage of this system is that even if someone has your username and password, they still can't get into your account because they probably wouldn't have your phone, or you would hope that they wouldn't have your phone anyway. The disadvantage at the same time is that you're going to have your cell phone with you at all times, and I have to confess that there have been more than a few times when I wanted to access a website on my iPad, and even though I had my username and password, I didn't have the darn cell phone with me, and therefore it was access denied. So, I don't know, it got me wondering whether the system is a nuisance or a necessity. I'm not sure it's worth the hassle. Here's an anecdote to illustrate what a farce it can be. I'm not sure how it happened. It's probably somehow my fault, I suppose, but one of the websites that I visit regularly sends the authentication message to the same computer that I'm logging in with. So if you can visualize that, if you understand what's happening there, that's the same as no authentication at all. So anyway, how's that any safer? Answer, it's not. And by the way, this is a company that touts its safety and security. So let's move on. Third topic along the same lines of protecting confidential information is phishing. The phishing that begins with the letter PH. This is a cleverly named e-fraud scheme describing an email that tricks you into clicking and visiting a bogus website that then, ironically, has you verify your identity by putting in personal information to prove who you are. I think I have something up on this. Yeah. This is an example of one. This is a bogus email, but that's one of the next things I was going to say about these things is that I've noted in recent years that these bogus emails have really stepped it up in terms of looking genuine and authentic. This Amazon.com one is not a bad one at all. The way they suck you in is not just to look authentic, but this is for products that I'd never really bought. So I guess the object then is to get you really infuriated, saying, hey, this John Smith down here at the bottom is using my credit card and my account information to order these expensive items that I'm going to have to pay for. So they want you to click or call and complain or whatever it is. That's a pretty good one in terms of bad ones. Anyway, How do you not get sucked into the e-fraud vortex? And the answer is really so stupidly simple. Don't click on emails. Let me give you an example of how this kind of plays out. Suppose I haven't checked my emails for a couple hours and the unread email number in Outlook is in the double digits. I look at inbox and I see, geez, half of the emails are trash. Russian women want to meet me, important documents to sign via DocuSign, stuff like that. These can be deleted, and I delete them. Then what I do is I have half of them left, and that remaining half, I look it over a little more carefully. And what I find is that half of the remaining half are trash as well. Asian women want to meet me. There are even more important documents to sign courtesy of DocuSign. They can be deleted as well, and that's what I do to those. That only leaves a handful, and those, when you look them over, well, heck, as I usually look them over, they're trash too. And it turns out of all those emails, I didn't get one lousy, relevant email in the bunch. Although I must admit, I had no idea how popular I was with women from other countries. Okay, bottom line, or what I was trying to get to, is if an email looks important enough that you want to click on it, still the rule is don't. Instead, investigate by making a quick telephone call or visit the website, something along those lines. In that regard, I heard a very prudent caution. I think I heard this from somebody at Consumer Reports, and they said, don't make the mistake of calling the phone number that's listed in the suspect email, no matter how authentic it looks, and don't use the email address listed at the bottom of the suspect email. Instead, use Google to find your contact information by looking it up independently and not relying on the e-fraud person to give you the email to call, or I should say the telephone number to call, because e-frauders can set up a call center like nothing. It's nothing to them to do that. And all they do, and they use the number, of course, that they put in the email. They've set that all up. Anyway, let's leave that topic now, and let's go on to viruses. Viruses are the second topic I wanted to talk very briefly about, and here's a quick history. When malicious software was first invented, if you can call it that, it usually consisted of a little tiny program that, once you got it on your system, it created copies of itself, and those copies made copies, and the copies of the copies made copies. And this thing went on, I don't know what they call it. Is that what they call in math, logarithmic or exponential? Anyway, very quickly your hard drive filled up, everything grinds to a halt, and some pundit observed that it propagated like a virus does, hence the name. As it turns out, the passage of time has made that name obsolete, and now bad software doesn't necessarily behave like that. And a good example is, you've probably heard of it, ransomware. Same bad result, but maybe it's even a worse result. It just works in a different way. And that's why the new name for software like this is called malware. It derives from the Latin mal, bad, ware, wares. Okay, I mean, I really did make that part up, but the rest of it is true. And no matter what the name, the software that protects against malware is still mostly called antivirus software. And there are some very good free ones available, and some of them are even recommended by the experts over the ones that you would buy. And Windows has the security software built right in. It's called Windows Defender. It's turned on by default, so if you don't have a third-party product installed, you probably already have Windows Defender on there. Is there a downside to AV software? Yeah, there's always a downside, and if there isn't, someone will come along and make one up anyway. So here's the downside in my view, is that updates can be a pain, and unfortunately they're very frequent. When I counted how many Windows updates there were in 2020, I believe there were 25, and it turned out to be almost 2 a month. And that's a lot of updating, and unfortunately that's what the experts' advice is: always update. Every time one's available, update, because that's what keeps you one step ahead of the viruses. That actually brings to mind my second gripe. True story. Windows 10 recently updated itself, and the update took several hours. I'm thinking between 3 and 5 hours. Had I known it was going to take that long, I would have been more careful about making a note of when I started it. I was thinking of sneaking it in during lunch hour, and it ended up that I tied up the computer for the whole afternoon. Pretty much cost me a half of a workday on that. That's a downside of antivirus software. And my third minor gripe is that if the updates are automatic, what happens is it might happen in the middle of the night. You might have a bunch of things on your screen and open documents and everything like that. It seems like once the update is complete, it's never quite leaves things the way it found them. Not to be turned off too much on it. I don't recall ever losing any information, but it just wasn't the way I left it, and it just wasn't something that I liked. Anyway, it wasn't a big deal, but in a nutshell, let's face it, you got to do what you got to do. You can't very well use your computer without AV software, and that's the basic facts. So I have one more subject I want to talk about, and that's backups. That's my final security item here. And you know what backups are. They're copies of all the important files on your hard drive. Every law office should have a backup. And actually, I talked to some offices that don't. Very surprising. My observation is that not having a backup is one of those things that happens to you one time. You know, once you lose 20 or 40 or 60 hours of work or more, most people are pretty good about not letting that happen again. Voice of experience, it did happen to me. It always, when you first start out, that kind of thing raises its ugly head, I guess. And it reminds me of what a wise man was once quoted as saying, "Fool me once, shame on you. Fool me, you can't get fooled again." That quote was verbatim. Anyway, in Windows, the backup software is free. It's called File History, and the only rub I can think of is that it requires an external hard drive. And if that's the bad news, the good news is that external hard drives are cheap to purchase and very easy to install. Plug it in the USB, you're done. I bought a 2 megabyte one on Amazon, which is, at least at the time this video is being made, that's plenty of space. I think it costs $70. Now, my advice about backups is I only have a couple things to say. Number one is to take care to inventory what you want to back up. It always seems like when I backed up, things got missed. And it was usually some non-document item. Like you've got all your pleadings and everything else backed up, but it ends up where you get on the new computer and you start up your email and you realize, oh, where's my email history? Or where's my Outlook contacts list? It seems like there's always something. So try to be as careful as you can by inventorying your computer and even making a short list of things that you don't want to get left out of the mix. Do you store your here's the next thing I was going to say is the next important thing is that you want to make sure that your client, if you store your client files in individual client folders, you want to make sure that those folders are included in the backup. Don't wait to find out. Make sure they are. And that brings me to my second bit of advice here, which is to check the backup periodically to make sure you can restore your files. Now, I remember years ago I had an old tape backup when that was the way to do it, and the tape stored data serially. So if you wanted something at the end of the tape and the tape was an hour long, you had to wait an hour to get to that. I actually did that one time. I needed something I needed something that we had backed up. It was about 45 minutes into the tape, I believe, and when I got to that point in the tape, it was corrupt. You could imagine what you'd say to yourself if you wasted the better part of an hour. Not only the wasting the hour, but the information was not available because the backup was corrupt. Yeah, it was not a pretty sight. And so anyway, what I do, and I just did this a couple days ago, sometimes I'll just think of a random file and say, okay, I want to back up this file, and just to see if I can back it up, just to assure myself that everything is still working. It puts your mind at rest, I should say, that everything's working. And so that's what I do, just to, so there's really, in the backup, in case I was too muddy on my explanation, my advice is to make sure you've thought of everything that you want back up. And number two is to make sure the backup actually works and you're not just going through the motions. Though there's the music signaling that it's time for me to say goodbye. I want to thank you for watching this video. I hope it was worth watching. And if you're an attorney or you work in a law office, there are dozens of demonstration videos that we have, and frequently asked questions videos. They're all directed pretty much at law offices, so take a look if you're interested. And until next time, I thank you for watching this video. Stay healthy and happy, and I wish you all the best.